The Little Mermaid Reimagined. A Mermaid's Love. Chapter 1. The Curious Mermaid. The morning currents carried whispers through the coral gardens of Atlantica, but Marina paid them no mind. She was too busy examining the peculiar brass object she'd discovered wedged between two sea anemones near the palace gardens. Its surface was tarnished green with age, and strange markings were etched around its circular face. She turned it over in her hands, marveling at the way the metal caught the filtered sunlight streaming down from the surface far above. "Another piece of human junk," scoffed Coral, one of Marina's younger cousins, as she swam past with a school of friends. "Don't you have anything better to do than collect garbage?" Marina's fingers tightened around the mysterious object. She had learned long ago not to argue with the other mermaids about her hobby. They simply couldn't understand the allure of these strange artifacts from the world above. To them, a broken compass was just debris. To Marina, it was a puzzle piece from an entirely different existence, a glimpse into lives lived under open sky instead of endless water. She tucked the compass carefully into her collection pouch, already imagining where it might fit in her secret grotto. Perhaps near the silver eating utensils she'd found last month, or beside the waterlogged books whose pages had long since dissolved, but whose leather covers still held their mysterious rectangular shape. The palace bells chimed the hour, their haunting melody echoing through the underwater kingdom. Marina knew she should be returning for her afternoon lessons in royal etiquette, but something glinted in the distance that made her heart race with possibility. A shipwreck she'd never noticed before lay half-buried in a sandy valley beyond the kelp forests. Without hesitation, she propelled herself forward with powerful strokes of her emerald tail. The wreck was ancient, its wooden hull encrusted with barnacles and sea moss. Schools of tropical fish had made their homes in the broken cargo hold, their bright colors flashing like living jewels as they darted between the debris. Marina's practiced eye immediately spotted treasures the other sea creatures had overlooked. A chain of tarnished silver links wound around a broken mast. Strange bottles with long necks were embedded in the sand, their glass surfaces clouded but still intact. Most intriguing of all was a wooden chest, its metal clasps corroded but still holding fast to whatever secrets lay within. She worked carefully, using a piece of sharp coral to pry at the chest's lock. Her collection wasn't just about gathering objects. It was about imagining the stories they held. Who had worn this jewelry? What had been stored in these bottles? Each artifact was a window into the mysterious lives of the surface dwellers. "Marina!" The voice of her sister Aqua cut through the water like a blade. "Father's been looking everywhere for you. You missed your lesson with the tide readers again." Marina's heart sank as she looked up to see Aqua's disapproving expression. Her older sister's perfect posture and carefully arranged hair made Marina suddenly aware of her own disheveled appearance, seaweed tangled in her dark locks, her hands dirty from digging through the shipwreck. "I was just collecting more of your strange treasures, I know," Aqua interrupted, her voice softening slightly. "Marina, you're a princess. You have responsibilities. The other mermaids are already talking about your eccentric interests. What will the neighboring kingdoms think when they hear that King Triton's daughter spends her days rummaging through human refuse?" Marina clutched her collection pouch protectively. "They're not refuse. They were pieces of another world. Don't you ever wonder what it's like up there? What it would be like to walk instead of swim, to see the sun without water between you and its warmth?" Aqua's expression grew troubled. "Marina, those are dangerous thoughts. The surface world is forbidden for good reason. Humans are destructive creatures who pollute our waters and destroy our coral reefs. Father has told us the stories." "Father tells us what he wants us to believe," Marina said quietly, then immediately regretted her words when she saw the shock on her sister's face. For a moment, the two princesses floated in uncomfortable silence, the weight of Marina's unspoken rebellion hanging between them like a storm cloud. "Please," Aqua said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "just be careful and come home. Father's waiting." As her sister swam away, Marina looked back at the shipwreck one last time. The wooden chest remained tantalizingly locked, its secrets still hidden. She would return tomorrow, she promised herself. She would always return, no matter what anyone said about her strange hobby. Because somewhere in her heart, deeper than the ocean trenches and stronger than the strongest current, Marina knew that these treasures were more than just objects. They were calling to her, drawing her toward a destiny she couldn't yet name, but felt as surely as the pull of the tides. She turned toward home, her collection pouch heavy with new discoveries, unaware that fate was already weaving her story with threads that stretched from the darkest depths to the brightest surface of the sea. Chapter 2. The Mermaid Market. The Coral Bazaar sprawled across the ocean floor like a living city, its vendors' stalls built from giant clamshells and woven kelp. Bioluminescent creatures served as living lanterns, casting an ethereal blue-green glow over the bustling marketplace. Marina swam through the crowded pathways, her eyes scanning each stall with the practiced gaze of a seasoned collector. Most mermaids came to the bazaar for practical things, fresh seaweed wraps, polished pearls, or enchanted jewelry that could summon schools of fish. Marina came for the impossible, the inexplicable, the things that made other shoppers wrinkle their noses in confusion. "Marina, dear," called Nerida, an elderly merchant whose stall specialized in what she generously called curiosities from the deep. Her booth was a chaotic jumble of objects that defied categorization, twisted pieces of metal, strange-shaped stones, and items that might have once been something important but had been transformed by time and salt water into mysteries. "What treasures do you have for me today, Nerida?" Marina asked, already digging through a basket of oddly shaped objects. The old mermaid's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Ah, I saved something special just for you." She produced a small rectangular object wrapped in seaweed. "Found this in a trader's net from the northern currents. He was going to throw it away, but I thought of my favorite young collector." Marina unwrapped the bundle carefully, gasping when she revealed what lay inside. It was a book, not like the waterlogged volumes in her collection, but something that had been preserved somehow. The cover was made of a strange, flexible material she'd never seen before, and when she opened it, the pages were filled with colorful illustrations that seemed to move in the shifting light. "It's magnificent," Marina breathed, running her fingers over the mysterious images. "What do you want for it?" "3 pearls from the southern beds," Nerida said with a grin. Marina didn't hesitate. She reached into her pouch and counted out 3 perfect pearls, each one worth a small fortune in the regular markets. Behind her, she heard a familiar snort of disapproval. "There she goes again," whispered Delphine, one of the court ladies who had unfortunately chosen today to visit the market. "Trading royal pearls for garbage. It's simply embarrassing." "Did you hear what she brought to show and tell at the Young Mermaids Academy last week?" added another voice. "A rusty piece of metal she claimed was a fork. Who would ever need 3 separate prongs to eat with? Our hands work perfectly fine." Marina's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she kept her head high as she tucked the strange book into her collection pouch. She'd learned to ignore the whispers, though they still stung like jellyfish tentacles. She moved on to the next stall, where a gruff-looking merman named Caspian sold deep trench rarities. His inventory was legendary among the more adventurous merfolk scales, from creatures that lived in the crushing darkness of the ocean's deepest places, bioluminescent pebbles that glowed with their own inner light, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, artifacts from the mysterious human vessels that occasionally sank to the ocean floor. "Princess Marina," Caspian nodded respectfully, though his tone was warmer than most of the other vendors. He was one of the few merchants who didn't seem to judge her unusual collecting habits. I have something that might interest you." He disappeared into the back of his stall and returned with a small cloth bundle. Inside were 3 scales unlike anything Marina had ever seen. Each one was perfectly transparent, like pieces of living glass, and they seemed to shimmer with rainbow colors when they caught the light. "Glass fin scales," Caspian explained, "from fish that live so deep they've never seen sunlight. They say these creatures are transparent because they've learned to become one with the darkness itself." Marina held up one of the scales, mesmerized by the way it seemed to bend light around itself. "They're incredible. I've never seen anything like them." "Most merfolk haven't," Caspian said. "These fish live in places where few dare to venture. The pressure alone would crush most sea creatures." As Marina negotiated for the scales, trading a handful of rare coral fragments she'd found near underwater volcanic vents, she became aware of a growing crowd gathering nearby. The whispers were getting louder, more pointed. "It's not natural, this obsession of hers," one voice said. "King Triton should put a stop to it," added another. "What kind of example is she setting for the younger mermaids?" "I heard she has a secret cave somewhere, filled with hundreds of these human contraptions," gossiped a third voice. "Imagine if the surface dwellers found out about us because of her reckless curiosity." Marina's hands trembled as she placed the glass fin scales in her pouch. The voices seemed to be coming from all directions now, a chorus of disapproval that followed her as she moved through the market. "Look at her," someone said, not even bothering to lower their voice, "swimming around like she owns the place, collecting trash while real mermaids are preparing for the Tide Festival." "My daughter asked me why Princess Marina spends so much time digging through shipwrecks," another voice chimed in. "What am I supposed to tell her? That it's acceptable for royalty to behave like a scavenger?" Marina's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she swam faster, weaving between the stalls with increasing desperation. She needed to escape, to find somewhere quiet, where she could examine her new treasures in peace. But everywhere she turned, there were more staring eyes, more whispered comments, more judgment. Even Nerida, who had always been kind to her, was now serving other customers and pointedly avoiding her gaze. Finally, Marina couldn't take it anymore. She burst from the market like a dolphin breaching the surface, swimming as fast as her tail could carry her toward the one place where she felt truly understood, her secret grotto, where her collection waited for her like old friends who would never judge her for being different. As she swam, Marina clutched her pouch tightly, feeling the weight of her new discoveries. The strange book with its colorful pictures, the impossible glass fin scales that seemed to hold starlight in their transparent depths. These treasures were worth more than all the pearls in the royal treasury, worth more than the approval of mermaids who couldn't see the magic in the unusual. But deep in her heart, a small voice whispered a question that scared her more than the deepest ocean trench. What if they were right? What if her obsession with the surface world was dangerous? What if her collection of human artifacts would somehow bring harm to the underwater kingdom she loved? Marina pushed the thought away and swam harder toward her sanctuary, where she could lose herself in wonder and forget, for a little while, that being different in Atlantica was the loneliest thing in the sea. Chapter 3. The Storm and the Prince. 3 days had passed since Marina's humiliating experience at the market, and she had spent them in the safety of her secret grotto, studying her new acquisitions. The mysterious book, with its colorful illustrations, remained stubbornly incomprehensible, but she found herself drawn to its images, strange land creatures, towering structures that seemed to reach toward the sky, and beings that looked almost like merpeople but with 2 strange appendages where tails should be. The glass fin scales had found a place of honor in her collection, displayed on a shelf of black coral where their transparency caught and refracted the bioluminescent light from her cave's ceiling. Each time she looked at them, Marina marveled at the creatures that could live in such crushing darkness, so deep that even other sea-dwellers considered them mythical. But today, something felt different in the water. There was an electricity in the currents, a restless energy that made the smaller fish dart nervously through the coral formations. Marina's father had taught her to read the ocean's moods. Every mermaid learned to sense approaching storms, but this felt bigger than any weather she'd experienced before. She swam to the entrance of her grotto and looked upward through the water column. Far above, the surface of the sea was churning with unnatural violence. Even from this depth, she could see the dark shadow of storm clouds blocking out the sun, turning the water an ominous shade of green-black. Most mermaids would have retreated deeper at the first sign of such a tempest. The surface during a storm was dangerous territory, where the normally gentle boundary between water and air became a chaotic battlefield of wind and waves. But Marina had always been drawn to danger, especially when it involved the mysterious world above. She began to swim upward, her powerful tail propelling her through the increasingly turbulent water. As she rose, she could hear something new, a sound that didn't belong to any storm. It was rhythmic, mechanical, accompanied by voices calling out in panic. Breaking through the surface for the first time in months, Marina gasped as the full fury of the storm hit her. Rain lashed her face like needles, and waves as tall as palace towers crashed around her. But what caught her attention wasn't the storm itself. It was the massive wooden ship struggling against the tempest. The vessel was unlike anything in her collection, grander and more elaborate than the broken wrecks she explored on the ocean floor. Its white sails were shredded by the wind, and Marina could see figures moving frantically across its deck, trying desperately to control their ship as it was tossed like a toy in the mountainous waves. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in stark detail. For one brilliant moment, Marina saw him, a young man standing at the ship's wheel, his dark hair whipping in the wind as he shouted orders to his crew. Even from a distance, even in the chaos of the storm, there was something about him that made her heart stop. He stood with natural authority, fearless in the face of the tempest, as if he belonged to both the sea and the storm itself. Then the lightning struck. The bolt hit the ship's main mast with a crack that echoed like thunder. The wooden pole split and toppled, its burning wreckage crashing onto the deck below. Marina watched in horror as the young man was struck by falling debris and thrown over the ship's railing into the churning sea. Without thinking, she dove. The water around the sinking ship was a maelstrom of broken wood, torn sailcloth, and desperate survivors. Marina swam through the chaos with the skill of someone born to the sea, dodging floating debris as she searched for the young man she'd seen fall. She found him sinking slowly through the dark water, unconscious and heavy in his waterlogged clothing. His face was peaceful despite the storm raging above, and Marina felt a strange pull toward him, not just the immediate need to save his life, but something deeper, as if the currents themselves were drawing her to him. She wrapped her arms around his chest and began the difficult journey to the surface. He was heavier than she'd expected, his strange land-dweller clothing dragging them both down. But Marina was strong from years of swimming in deep currents, and she managed to break through the waves just as his lungs began to demand air. Finding a piece of floating debris large enough to support him, Marina carefully positioned the unconscious young man so his head stayed above water. This close, she could see his face clearly. Strong features softened by youth, skin tanned by sun and sea spray, and dark lashes that rested against his cheeks like shadows. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. As if summoned by her voice, his eyes fluttered open. They were the color of sea glass, that perfect blue-green that Marina had only seen in the shallow waters near tropical islands. For a moment, although he had trouble seeing, his eyes focused on her face, and Marina felt as if the entire ocean had suddenly gone still. Am I dead? He asked weakly, his voice barely audible over the storm. No, Marina said softly, forgetting for a moment that she shouldn't speak to a human, that this encounter broke every law her father had established. You're safe. He tried to speak again, but his eyes rolled back, and consciousness left him once more. Marina realized she had to get him to shore quickly. The storm was growing worse, and even her strength had limits. She began to swim toward the distant coastline, pulling the makeshift raft behind her. As she swam, she found herself stealing glances at the young man's face, memorizing every detail. There was something about him that called to the same part of her spirit that collected treasures and explored forbidden places. He was like a living artifact from the surface world, but infinitely more precious than anything in her grotto. The journey to shore took hours, with Marina fighting against storm currents and driving rain. By the time she reached the sandy beach of a secluded cove, her arms ached and her tail felt leaden with exhaustion. She managed to pull the young man onto the sand, checking to make sure he was breathing steadily before allowing herself a moment to rest. As the storm began to clear, dawn light filtered through the dissipating clouds. Marina knew she should leave. Someone would come looking for him soon, and she couldn't be discovered. But she found herself reluctant to go, captivated by this glimpse into the world she'd always wondered about. "Prince Adrian!" The distant call echoed across the water. "Your Highness!" A prince. Marina's heart fluttered with the knowledge. She had saved a prince from the surface world, and for one perfect moment, he had looked at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The voices were getting closer. Marina slipped back into the waves, but she couldn't resist watching from behind a cluster of rocks as a group of searchers found the young prince on the beach. She saw him sit up, saw him look around in confusion, heard him ask about the girl with the voice like music who had saved him. But there was no girl to be found, only the endless sea and the memory of sea-green eyes that had pulled him back from the edge of death. As Marina swam back toward home, her heart was full of something she'd never felt before, a longing that had nothing to do with collecting treasures or exploring shipwrecks. For the first time in her life, she wanted something from the surface world that she couldn't simply find and take. She wanted to see Prince Adrian again. She wanted to hear his voice, to learn his thoughts, to discover if the brief connection she'd felt in that storm-tossed moment had been real or just her imagination. But most of all, she wanted to find a way to be part of his world, even if it meant leaving her own behind. Chapter 4. The Sea Witch's Bargain. For 2 weeks after the storm, Marina could think of nothing but Prince Adrian's sea-glass eyes and the sound of his voice asking if he was dead. She had returned to her grotto countless times, studying her collection of human artifacts with new intensity, imagining how each object might have been part of his world. The fork she'd been mocked for collecting, perhaps he had used one just like it. The mysterious books. Maybe he could read the strange markings that remained incomprehensible to her. But imagination wasn't enough anymore. Every time she surfaced near the coastline, hoping for another glimpse of the prince, she saw only empty beaches and distant castle towers. The barrier between her world and his had never felt more insurmountable. "Marina, you've barely touched your kelp salad," Aqua observed during the family dinner, her voice tinged with concern. "And you missed the entire conversation about the choral festival preparations." King Triton looked up from his own meal, his weathered face creasing with worry. "You've been distracted lately, my daughter. Is there something troubling you?" Marina's heart raced. She couldn't tell her father about the storm, about the prince, about the growing certainty that her destiny lay somewhere beyond the coral walls of Atlantica. "I'm fine, Father. Just thinking about my collection." "Ah, yes, your treasures." Triton's expression softened slightly. "Perhaps it's time you considered sharing your knowledge with the royal historians. Some of those artifacts might be of interest to our scholars. The suggestion should have thrilled her. For years, Marina had dreamed of her father taking her collection seriously. But now, the thought of letting others examine her treasures felt like betrayal. Those objects were her connection to Adrian's world, and she wasn't ready to share that connection with anyone. That night, as the palace slept, Marina swam alone through the darkest trenches of the ocean. She had made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. If she couldn't find a way to reach the surface world through conventional means, then she would seek help from the one being in the sea who had the power to grant impossible wishes. The sea witch's lair lay in the forbidden depths, where the ocean floor dropped away into an abyss so dark that even bioluminescent creatures avoided it. Marina had heard whispers of Ursula all her life, a powerful sorceress who had been banished from Atlantica long before Marina's birth for practicing forbidden magic. The stories said she could grant any wish for a price. As Marina descended into the crushing darkness, glowing tentacles began to appear in the water around her. Not the friendly appendages of familiar sea creatures, but something ancient and alien. They guided her through a maze of underwater caverns until she reached a clearing where the very water seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Ursula's lair was unlike anything Marina had ever seen. The cave walls were lined with the preserved remains of creatures she couldn't identify, and floating bottles containing swirling, luminescent potions cast eerie shadows across the rocky surfaces. At the center of it all sat the sea witch herself. Ursula was magnificent and terrible in equal measure. Her upper body retained the classical beauty of the merpeople, but her lower half was a writhing mass of black tentacles that moved with hypnotic grace. Her white hair floated around her like a storm cloud, and her eyes glowed with an inner fire that seemed to see straight through Marina's soul. "Well, well," Ursula's voice was rich and melodious, tinged with dark amusement. "Princess Marina, collector of surface treasures. I've been expecting you." Marina tried to keep her voice steady. "You have?" "Oh, my dear child," Ursula laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "I see everything that happens in my ocean, including a certain rescue during the recent storm." Heat flooded Marina's cheeks. "You know about Prince Adrian of the Northern Kingdom, about how you saved his life and felt your heart skip when he looked at you." Ursula's tentacles writhed with pleasure at Marina's obvious discomfort. "I know about all of it, and I know why you're here." Marina straightened her shoulders, calling upon every lesson in royal dignity her father had taught her. "Then you know I need your help to reach the surface world." "Indeed." Ursula circled her slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. "You want to walk on land, to breathe air, to court a human prince. Such romantic notions. But magic of this magnitude comes with a price, little mermaid." "What price?" Marina asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Ursula's smile revealed teeth like pointed pearls. "Your life." The words hit Marina like a rogue current. My life? "Oh, not immediately." Ursula waved a dismissive tentacle. "I'm not unreasonable. I'll give you 1 month to win your prince's love. If he falls in love with you, truly, completely, the kind of love that would make him choose you over crown and kingdom, then you live. You get to keep your human form and stay in his world forever. And if he doesn't?" Marina's voice was barely a whisper. "Then you die." Ursula's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "Your body will dissolve into sea foam, and your soul will become part of my collection." She gestured to the bottles lining her cave walls, and Marina realized with horror that they contained more than just potions. That's impossible," Marina stammered. "How could I make someone fall in love with me in just 1 month? And he won't even recognize me. He only saw me for a moment during the storm." "Ah, yes, that does present a problem," Ursula mused with false sympathy. I suppose I could leave your voice unchanged, but then he might remember you as his mysterious rescuer. Where's the fun in that? No, I think I'll modify your voice instead. Change its tone, its timbre, its very essence. He'll hear you speak and think you're just another human girl. Marina's mind raced. A month to make a prince fall in love with her, without him knowing she was the one who saved his life. It seemed impossible, a task designed to ensure her failure. Why, she asked, why offer me this bargain if you expect me to fail? Ursula's expression shifted, revealing something cold and calculating beneath her theatrical manner. Because, my dear princess, I've grown tired of my exile in these dark depths. Your father banished me for seeking power he deemed too dangerous. But imagine how his attitude might change if his beloved daughter's life hung in the balance. Your death would give me leverage over King Triton that I've never possessed before. The truth hit Marina like a physical blow. This wasn't about helping her reach her dreams. It was about using her as a weapon against her father, against the entire kingdom of Atlantica. You're planning to use my death to hurt my family, Marina said, her voice growing stronger with anger. I'm offering you exactly what you want, Ursula countered smoothly. The chance to live in the surface world with your precious prince. The fact that your failure would serve my purposes is merely convenient. Marina stared at the sea witch, her mind churning with possibilities and consequences. Everything logical told her to swim away, to find another solution, to accept that some dreams were too dangerous to pursue. But in her heart, she could still see Adrian's face in that moment when their eyes had met, could still feel the certainty that her destiny lay somewhere beyond the sea. There's more, Ursula continued, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality. I'll give you beauty, grace, in your new human form, and the ability to learn their customs quickly. I'll even ensure that fate places you in the prince's path. All you have to do is make him love you. And if I refuse? Ursula shrugged, her tentacles creating mesmerizing patterns in the dark water. Then you return to your little grotto, to your collection of treasures, to a life of wondering, what if? You'll marry some merman prince your father chooses, have little mermaid children, and grow old knowing you had one chance to live your dreams and let fear stop you. The words stung because they held truth. Marina had spent her entire life collecting pieces of the surface world while remaining safely beneath the waves. This might be her only opportunity to actually become part of that world, to discover if the connection she'd felt with Adrian was real or just fantasy. I accept, she said, the words leaving her lips before she could second-guess herself. Ursula's smile was triumphant. Excellent! Oh, this is going to be delicious. She began gathering ingredients from around her lair shells that whispered when touched, seaweed that glowed with inner fire, and a vial of what looked like liquid starlight. As the sea witch began her incantation, Marina felt the weight of her decision settling over her like the crushing pressure of the deep ocean. She had 1 month to accomplish the impossible, 1 month to make a prince fall in love with a girl he'd never met, 1 month to save not just her own life, but potentially her entire kingdom from Ursula's vengeance. The transformation magic began to swirl around her, and Marina's last thought before the spell took hold was a prayer to whatever forces watched over foolish mermaids who risked everything for love. Let this be the right choice. Let her heart's certainty prove stronger than the sea witch's cruel calculations, because there was no turning back now. Chapter 5. The Princess's Assistant. Marina's first sensation upon awakening was the strange feeling of air filling her lungs instead of water. She lay on warm sand, her body feeling alien and unfamiliar. Where her powerful tail had once been, 2 pale, slender appendages extended from her hips' legs. She realized with wonder and terror. Her transformation had worked. She struggled to sit up, marveling at how different everything felt. The weight of her body was distributed differently, and when she tried to move as she would underwater, she nearly fell over. Walking, she discovered, was far more complicated than swimming. The beach where she had awakened was secluded, bordered by tall cliffs and accessible only by a narrow path that wound up the rocky face. Marina spent her first hour practicing the basic mechanics of her new form standing, taking tentative steps, learning to balance on these strange new limbs. The transformation had provided her with a simple white dress that felt foreign against her skin, but at least she wasn't entirely naked in this bewildering new world. As the sun climbed higher, Marina heard voices approaching along the cliff path. Panic seized her. She wasn't ready to encounter humans yet, wasn't prepared to test whether her new voice would betray her origins. She managed to hide behind a large boulder just as two figures appeared on the beach. "I still think this is a waste of time, Isabella," a male voice said with obvious irritation. "Adrian's been brooding for weeks about some imaginary girl who saved him from the storm. He needs to focus on his royal duties, not chase fantasies." "Marcus, you have no romance in your soul," replied a melodious female voice. "My brother knows what he saw. If there's even a chance this mysterious girl exists, we should help him find her." Marina peeked around the boulder and saw a young woman with auburn hair piled elegantly atop her head, wearing a gown of deep blue silk that marked her as nobility. Beside her stood a stern-looking man in royal livery, clearly a palace advisor or guard. "Princess Isabella," Marcus said with barely concealed exasperation, "half the eligible young women in the kingdom have claimed to be Prince Adrian's rescuer. We can't investigate every—" He stopped mid-sentence as Isabella gasped, pointing toward Marina's hiding spot. "Marcus, look, there's someone there!" Marina's heart hammered as she realized she'd been discovered. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. She stepped out from behind the boulder, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Please, don't be afraid," Isabella said gently, approaching with the natural grace of someone born to put others at ease. "Are you hurt? How did you come to be here alone?" Marina opened her mouth to speak and froze. This was the first test of Ursula's magic. Would her voice give her away as something otherworldly? When the words finally came, they sounded different even to her own ears. Her voice was still musical, but it had a different quality now, more suited to air than water. I don't remember much," Marina said, the lie feeling heavy on her tongue. "I was on a ship that was caught in a storm. I think I washed ashore here." Isabella's eyes immediately filled with compassion. "Oh, you poor dear. That terrible storm weeks ago, were you on one of the merchant vessels that went down?" Marina nodded, grateful that Isabella was providing her with a plausible story. "I think so. Everything is rather foggy." Marcus stepped forward, his expression skeptical. "What ship? What was your name? Surely you remember something." "Marcus, really," Isabella chided. "The poor girl has obviously been through a trauma. Of course, her memory would be affected." She turned back to Marina with a warm smile. "What do you remember? Anything at all?" "Marina," she said quickly, then realized she should have chosen a different name. "My name is Marina." "A beautiful name," Isabella said approvingly. "And do you have family? Somewhere to go?" Marina shook her head, which was at least partially true. She couldn't exactly explain that her family lived in an underwater kingdom. "Then you'll come with us," Isabella declared, ignoring Marcus's sharp intake of breath. "We can't leave you here alone. The palace has room, and I'm sure we can find you suitable employment." "Your Highness," Marcus protested, "you can't simply bring strange young women into the palace. There are protocols, security concerns." "Nonsense," Isabella waved dismissively. "Look at her, Marcus. Does she look dangerous to you?" She studied Marina's face carefully. "You know, "There's something almost ethereal about you, Marina. You have the most unusual eyes. They're the color of sea glass." Marina's breath caught. Prince Adrian had eyes the same shade. She wondered if it was coincidence or if families in this region shared similar coloring. "Come," Isabella said, extending her hand. "Let's get you properly dressed and fed. I suspect you have quite a story to tell, even if you can't remember all of it yet." The climb up the cliff path was treacherous for someone still learning to use legs, but Marina managed with Isabella's patient assistance. When they reached the top, Marina got her first clear view of the castle in the distance, and her heart nearly stopped. It was magnificent, all white stone and soaring towers, with banners snapping in the ocean breeze. This was where Prince Adrian lived, where she would need to win his love within the span of a month. The task seemed even more impossible now that she could see the grandeur of his world. "Impressive, isn't it?" Isabella said, noticing Marina's awed expression. "It's been in our family for generations. My brother will inherit it all someday, when he's ready to settle down and take a wife." They rode to the palace in Isabella's carriage, and Marina tried to absorb every detail of this new world. The countryside was green and rolling, dotted with small villages where people waved respectfully as the royal carriage passed. Everything was so different from the fluid, three-dimensional world of the sea, fixed, solid, bound by the strange rules of gravity and ground. At the palace, Isabella swept Marina through corridors lined with tapestries and portraits, past rooms filled with treasures that put even Marina's collection to shame. Servants bowed as they passed, their eyes curious but respectful. "Mrs. Pemberton," Isabella called to an older woman in a crisp black dress who appeared to run the household staff. "This is Marina. She's a shipwreck survivor we found on the beach. I want her cleaned up, properly dressed, and given quarters near my chambers." Mrs. Pemberton's experienced gaze assessed Marina quickly. "Of course, Your Highness. What position will she be taking?" Isabella paused, clearly making the decision on the spot. "She'll be my lady-in-waiting's assistant, someone to help Cordelia with the daily tasks of managing my schedule and correspondence." "An excellent choice," Mrs. Pemberton said approvingly. "Come along, dear. Let's get you settled." As Marina was led away to be bathed and dressed in proper palace attire, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure in the courtyard below. Prince Adrian stood with his back to the window, speaking with someone in military dress. Even from this distance, Marina could see the set of his shoulders, the way he gestured when making a point. Her month had begun. That evening, dressed in a simple but elegant gown of soft gray wool, Marina was introduced to Cordelia, Isabella's lady-in-waiting. Cordelia was a practical woman in her 30s who seemed grateful for the additional help. "You'll start tomorrow," Cordelia explained, as she showed Marina to her small but comfortable room. "Princess Isabella keeps a busy schedule correspondence with other nobles, charity work, planning for court events. There's always something that needs organizing." Marina nodded eagerly. "I'm grateful for the opportunity. Princess Isabella has been very kind." "She has a good heart," Cordelia agreed. "Sometimes too good for her own safety, bringing in strangers from the beach." She gave Marina a pointed look. "But I'm a good judge of character, and I think you'll work out well here." As Marina settled into her narrow bed that first night, she stared out her window at the moonlight reflecting off the distant ocean. Somewhere beneath those waves, her father was probably discovering her absence. Her sisters were wondering where she'd gone, and her secret grotto sat empty of its collector. She had 29 days left to make Prince Adrian fall in love with her. Tomorrow, she would begin the most important performance of her life, pretending to be a human girl, while trying to capture the heart of the man she'd saved from the sea. The irony wasn't lost on her that in gaining legs, she might have lost her only advantage. As a mysterious mermaid who'd rescued him, she'd been magical, memorable. As Marina the shipwreck survivor, She was just another young woman in a palace full of them. But she was here, in his world, breathing the same air he breathed. That had to count for something. It had to be enough. Chapter 6. Growing Closer. Marina's first week at the palace passed in a blur of learning human customs and trying to catch glimpses of Prince Adrian. She threw herself into her duties with Cordelia, organizing Princess Isabella's correspondence and helping plan a charity event for the local orphanage. But every moment, she was aware of the steady tick of time, 22 days remaining. It was during her second week that fate finally provided the opportunity she'd been hoping for. "Marina," Princess Isabella called one morning as she reviewed invitations in her private sitting room, "I need you to deliver this message to my brother. He's in the library, and I'm afraid if I don't send it immediately, he'll forget about the ambassador's visit this afternoon." Marina's heart leaped, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course, Your Highness." The library was a magnificent room with floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with more books than Marina had ever imagined could exist. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating floating dust motes that danced like tiny sea sprites. At a large oak table near the windows sat Prince Adrian, bent over what appeared to be maritime charts. For a moment, Marina simply stood in the doorway, drinking in the sight of him. He looked older than he had during the storm, more serious, with faint lines of worry around his sea-glass eyes. His dark hair was longer than she remembered, and he had the lean build of someone who spent time sailing, rather than just sitting in throne rooms. "Your Highness?" she said softly, not wanting to startle him. Adrian looked up, and Marina felt that same electric jolt she'd experienced during their first meeting. His eyes met hers with a flicker of something confusion, perhaps, or a sense of familiarity he couldn't quite place. "I'm sorry," he said, rising politely. "I don't think we've been introduced." "Marina, Your Highness, I'm Princess Isabella's assistant." She stepped forward to hand him the message, acutely aware of how different her voice sounded with Ursula's magic. "She asked me to deliver this." Adrian took the note, but his eyes remained on her face. "Marina, that's a lovely name. Very oceanic." "Thank you," she managed, wondering if he could somehow sense her true nature. "Have we met before?" he asked suddenly. "There's something familiar about you, though I'm certain I would remember." Marina's heart raced. This was dangerous territory. "I don't think so, Your Highness. I'm new to the palace. Princess Isabella found me after I was shipwrecked in that terrible storm a few weeks ago." The mention of the storm caused Adrian's expression to shift dramatically. "The storm," he repeated slowly. "You were in that storm?" "I believe so. My memory of the event is rather unclear." Adrian set down the message, his full attention now focused on her. "What do you remember? Anything at all?" Marina chose her words carefully. "Water. So much water. The feeling of drowning. And then waking up on the beach." She paused, then added quietly, "I remember a voice. Someone who helped me, though I can't recall who." "A voice," Adrian repeated, his eyes never leaving her face. "What did it sound like?" Like music," Marina said truthfully, remembering her own natural voice, "like someone singing." Adrian's breath caught, and for a moment the room fell into charged silence. Then he seemed to collect himself, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Marina found endearingly boyish. "Forgive me," he said. "The storm is a subject of particular interest to me. I was rescued as well, you see, by someone I never properly thanked." "Perhaps we were rescued by the same person," Marina suggested, her heart aching with the irony. "Perhaps," Adrian agreed, though he looked troubled. "Tell me, what do you make of these charts?" Marina moved closer to look at the papers spread across the table. They showed the coastline around the kingdom, with detailed notations about currents, tide patterns, and shipping routes. To most humans, they would probably be incomprehensible, but Marina had spent her life reading the ocean's movements. "These current patterns here," she said, pointing to a section of the map, "they're incorrect. The spring tides would create a stronger northward flow, especially during storm season." Adrian stared at her in amazement. "You can read maritime charts?" Marina realized her mistake too late. How would a shipwreck survivor have such detailed knowledge of ocean currents? My father was a sailor," she improvised. "He taught me to read the sea before he died." "Your father must have been an exceptional sailor," Adrian said admiringly. "These are errors that even my own naval advisors missed." As they continued to discuss the charts, Marina found herself relaxing despite the deception. Adrian was intelligent and genuinely interested in her thoughts, treating her opinions with respect rather than dismissing them because she was a woman. More importantly, there was something in the way he looked at her, not just attraction, though that was certainly present, but a deeper recognition, as if some part of him sensed their connection. "Your Highness," she said eventually, "Princess Isabella mentioned that you enjoy walking in the palace gardens. I've heard they're quite beautiful." "They are," Adrian agreed. "In fact, I was planning to take a walk this afternoon after my meeting with the ambassador. Would you, that is, if your duties permit, would you care to join me?" Marina's heart soared. "I would be honored." That afternoon, with Princess Isabella's enthusiastic approval, "Oh, how wonderful! Adrian needs more pleasant company." Marina found herself strolling through the palace gardens with the prince. The gardens were indeed magnificent, with carefully cultivated flower beds, bubbling fountains, and winding paths that led to secluded alcoves perfect for private conversation. "I feel as though I can speak freely with you," Adrian said as they paused beside a fountain carved with dolphins. "Most people at court tell me what they think I want to hear, but you seem different." "How so?" Marina asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "You speak of the sea as if you truly understand it," he said thoughtfully. "Not as something to be conquered or feared, but as something alive, something connected to everything else." Marina nodded eagerly. "The sea touches every shore, every river flows back to it eventually. All life began there, in a way. We're all connected by water, whether we realize it or not." Adrian stopped walking entirely, turning to face her with an expression of wonder. "That's exactly what I've always believed, but I've never heard anyone else express it so perfectly." They continued their walk, their conversation flowing as naturally as tides. Adrian told her about his love of sailing, his frustration with the isolating aspects of royal duty, and his dreams of exploring distant kingdoms across the sea. Marina found herself sharing carefully edited versions of her own thoughts, her fascination with different cultures, her belief that understanding came through curiosity rather than fear, her conviction that the most beautiful things were often found in unexpected places. "You speak as if you've traveled widely," Adrian observed, "yet you said your father was a simple sailor." Marina felt the familiar panic of nearly revealing too much. "Travel in books and stories," she said quickly. "My father told me tales of the places he'd visited, and I've always had an active imagination." By the time they returned to the palace, the sun was setting, and Marina felt as though she were floating rather than walking. The afternoon had been magical, in a way that had nothing to do with Ursula's spells. It had been the simple magic of two people discovering they understood each other. "I very much enjoyed our conversation," Adrian said as they reached the palace steps. "I hope we might do this again soon." "I would like that very much," Marina replied, truthfully. Over the following days, their walks became a regular occurrence. Princess Isabella actively encouraged the friendship, often sending Marina on errands that would conveniently place her in Adrian's path, or suggesting activities that would throw them together. "I haven't seen my brother this animated in months," Isabella confided to Marina one morning as they planned seating arrangements for an upcoming ball. "You've been a wonderful influence on him." Marina blushed, torn between pleasure at the compliment and guilt over the deception. "He's very easy to talk to, Your Highness." "Oh, I think it's more than that," Isabella said with a knowing smile. "I think you two have developed quite an understanding." As if summoned by their conversation, Adrian appeared in the doorway of Isabella's sitting room. "Good morning, ladies. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," Isabella said brightly. "In fact, I was just about to suggest that you escort Marina on a picnic this afternoon. The weather is perfect, and I'm sure she would enjoy seeing more of the countryside." Adrian's face lit up. "An excellent idea. Marina, would you care to join me for an outdoor luncheon? I know a perfect spot overlooking the sea." Marina's heart fluttered at the prospect of spending more time alone with him, especially somewhere that would let her see her beloved ocean. "That sounds wonderful." That afternoon, they rode to a meadow high on the cliffs, where servants had already laid out a feast on blankets spread beneath an ancient oak tree. The view was breathtaking, rolling green hills dotted with wild flowers, and beyond them, the endless expanse of blue sea stretching to the horizon. "It's beautiful," Marina breathed, her eyes fixed on the water below. "I come here when I need to think," Adrian said, settling beside her on the blanket. "There's something about the sea that puts everything in perspective." They shared the meal while talking about everything and nothing. The changing patterns of clouds overhead, the meaning of courage, the way different kingdoms approached diplomacy. With each conversation, Marina felt herself falling deeper under Adrian's spell, not because of any magic, but because of his genuine kindness, his quick wit, and the way he listened to her as if her thoughts truly mattered. "Marina," he said suddenly, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I hope you won't think me too forward, but I find myself looking forward to our time together more than anything else in my day." Marina's breath caught. "I feel the same way." "There's something about you," he continued, his sea-glass eyes searching her face, "something that makes me feel as though I've been waiting for you my entire life, even though we've only just met." The words were everything Marina had hoped to hear, but they also brought a sharp pang of sadness. He was falling for her, but not for who she truly was. He was falling for a carefully crafted illusion, a human girl who didn't really exist. "Adrian," she said softly, using his name without the formal title for the first time. "Yes? Do you believe in destiny? In the idea that some people are meant to find each other?" He reached out and gently touched her hand, sending warmth racing up her arm. "I'm beginning to." As they sat together, watching the sun sink toward the sea, Marina allowed herself to hope. 18 days remained, but already she could see love growing in Adrian's eyes. Perhaps Ursula's cruel bargain wouldn't claim her life after all. Perhaps love really could conquer even the most impossible circumstances. But deep in her heart, a small voice whispered warnings about the price of deception and the distance between falling in love with someone and truly knowing who they are. Chapter 7. Sabotage and Schemes. In the depths of her underwater lair, Ursula watched the growing romance between Marina and Prince Adrian with increasing fury. Through her enchanted crystal orb, she observed their tender conversations, their lingering glances, the way Adrian's face lit up whenever Marina entered a room. With only 2 weeks remaining in their bargain, it was becoming clear that her carefully laid plans were unraveling. "No, no, no!" she shrieked, her tentacles writhing in agitation. "This was supposed to be impossible. The little princess was meant to fail, to die, and give me leverage over that pompous King Triton." The bottles containing captured souls trembled on their shelves as Ursula's rage filled the cavern. She had counted on Marina's naivety, on the impossibility of making someone fall in love without revealing her true identity. But the mermaid princess was proving more resourceful than anticipated. "Very well," Ursula hissed, her eyes glowing with malevolent determination. "If fate won't cooperate, then I'll simply have to intervene. Meanwhile, at the palace, Marina was experiencing the happiest days of her life. Her morning duties with Princess Isabella flew by as she anticipated her afternoon walks with Adrian. Their conversations had grown deeper and more intimate, touching on subjects she'd never shared with anyone. Her dreams of exploration, her belief in the interconnectedness of all living things, her conviction that understanding between different peoples was not only possible, but essential. "You have such unusual perspectives for someone so young," Adrian had said just the day before as they strolled through the rose garden. "Sometimes I feel as though you've lived a dozen different lives." Marina had laughed, trying to hide the truth behind humor. "Perhaps I have, in books and dreams." Now, as she arranged flowers in Princess Isabella's chambers, Marina found herself humming something she'd done more and more lately as happiness bubbled up inside her like a natural spring. "You're glowing," Isabella observed with amusement. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone so content while arranging chrysanthemums." Marina blushed. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. I know I should focus on my work." "Nonsense," Isabella waved dismissively. "A woman in love should glow. It's one of nature's most beautiful sights." She paused, studying Marina's face carefully. "You are in love, aren't you?" Marina's hands stilled on the flowers. She couldn't deny it. What she felt for Adrian had grown far beyond her initial attraction. She loved his quick mind, his gentle humor, the way he treated servants and nobles with equal respect. She loved how he listened to her opinions without condescension, how he shared his own doubts and dreams with increasing openness. "Yes," she whispered, "I am. And my brother, how does he feel?" Marina's heart fluttered with hope and uncertainty. I hope he might feel the same way." Isabella smiled warmly. "Oh, my dear girl, there's no question about it. Adrian speaks of little else but you. Why, just this morning, he asked me about the upcoming midsummer ball, wondering if you might like to attend as his guest." Marina's breath caught. The midsummer ball was the most elegant social event of the season, where Adrian would formally announce his choice of companion to the entire court. If he chose her. "But first," Isabella continued, "there's tonight's reception for the visiting dignitaries. Adrian specifically requested that you join us for dinner afterward. He wants to introduce you to some of the other young nobles." That evening, Marina dressed with extra care in a gown of deep blue silk that Isabella had insisted she wear. "It brings out your eyes," the princess had declared, and Marina had to admit the color did complement her unusual sea-green gaze. The reception was a glittering affair, with diplomats and nobles from neighboring kingdoms filling the great hall. Marina stood beside Isabella, watching Adrian charm foreign ambassadors with his natural diplomacy. She felt proud of him, and more than a little amazed that this remarkable man seemed to genuinely care for her. As the evening progressed, Adrian caught her eye across the room and smiled, the private, warm smile she'd come to treasure. He began making his way toward her through the crowd. That's when the first strange thing happened. Just as Adrian was almost within speaking distance, a servant carrying a tray of wine glasses stumbled, drenching Adrian's formal jacket in red wine. In the confusion that followed, as servants rushed to help clean the mess, Marina lost sight of him in the crowd. She waited for nearly an hour, but Adrian never reappeared. Finally, Isabella approached her with a puzzled expression. "The strangest thing," Isabella said. "Adrian asked me to give you his apologies. He said he suddenly felt quite ill and had to retire for the evening." Marina's heart sank. "Is he all right?" "He seemed fine earlier," Isabella mused. "Perhaps something he ate didn't agree with him. I'm sure he'll be better tomorrow." But the next day, when Marina went to the library where she and Adrian usually met for their morning conversations, she found it empty. Cordelia mentioned that the prince had cancelled all his appointments and was meeting with his naval advisors about urgent shipping matters. 3 days passed without Marina seeing Adrian at all. When she finally encountered him in the palace corridors, his greeting was polite but distant, nothing like the warm intimacy they'd been developing. "Your Highness," she said, curtsying formally, "I hope you're feeling better." "Better?" Adrian looked confused. "Oh yes, much better, thank you." But there was something odd about his expression, as if he were looking through her rather than at her. "I was wondering if you might like to walk in the gardens this afternoon," Marina ventured, her heart racing with anxiety. "The gardens?" Adrian's brow furrowed. "I'm afraid I'm quite busy today. Perhaps another time." He walked away without the warm smile or lingering glance she'd grown accustomed to, leaving Marina standing alone in the hallway, with tears threatening to spill. What followed was a week of increasingly strange incidents. Every time Marina and Adrian seemed to be connecting again, something would interrupt them. During a dinner where Adrian had been paying her particular attention, a chandelier mysteriously came loose from the ceiling, crashing down between them and forcing the evening to end early. When Adrian suggested they attend a theatrical performance together, Marina developed a sudden, inexplicable fever that left her bedridden for 2 days. Most troubling of all were the changes in Adrian's behavior. One moment he would look at her with the same growing affection she remembered, and the next he would seem confused, as if he couldn't quite remember why he'd been spending so much time with her. "I don't understand it," Isabella confided to Marina one morning as they reviewed correspondence. "Adrian keeps asking me strange questions about you, whether I'm certain about your background, whether there might be something you're not telling us. It's as if someone has been planting seeds of doubt in his mind." Marina felt a chill of foreboding. With only 1 week remaining in her bargain with Ursula, these weren't random coincidences. They were deliberate sabotage. That night, Marina slipped away from the palace and made her way to the secluded beach where she'd first arrived in human form. Standing at the water's edge, she called out to the sea in the old language her people used for summoning. The response came immediately. The water began to glow with an eerie phosphorescence, and Ursula's image materialized in the foam of the waves. "Why, Princess Marina," the sea witch's voice carried across the water with mocking sweetness, "you look troubled. Having difficulties winning your prince's heart?" "You're interfering," Marina accused. "The bargain was for 1 month to win his love naturally. You're using magic to sabotage us." Ursula's laughter was like the sound of grinding shells. "Oh, my dear naive child, I promised to give you 1 month and a human form. I never promised not to help fate along when it seemed to be moving in the wrong direction." "That's cheating." "That's survival," Ursula corrected coldly. "Did you really think I would simply stand by and watch you succeed? Watch you slip through my fingers and deny me my revenge against your father?" Marina's hands clenched into fists. "What have you done to him?" "Nothing permanent," Ursula said with false reassurance. "Just a few minor enchantments to cloud his judgment, to make him question his feelings. A little doubt here, a moment of confusion there. Nothing he won't recover from, after you're dead and no longer a concern." "You're evil," Marina whispered. "I'm practical," Ursula replied. "You have 7 days left, little princess. 7 days to make him love you despite my interference, despite his growing suspicions, despite the voice in the back of his mind telling him that something isn't quite right about the mysterious Marina." The sea witch's image began to fade, but her voice remained clear. "Oh, and Marina? Each day will be harder than the last. I do so enjoy a challenge." As the phosphorescent glow disappeared, leaving Marina alone on the dark beach, she felt the weight of true despair for the first time since making her bargain. Ursula wasn't just powerful, she was ruthless, willing to bend the rules of their agreement to ensure Marina's failure. 7 days to overcome magical interference, to break through the doubts Ursula was planting in Adrian's mind, to somehow prove her love was real, despite being built on deception. 7 days to save not just her own life, but to prevent Ursula from using her death as a weapon against her father and the entire kingdom of Atlantica. For the first time since arriving on land, Marina wondered if she had been a fool to believe that love alone could triumph over the sea witch's malevolent schemes. Chapter 8. Love Conquers All. Marina returned to the palace with a newfound determination burning in her chest. If Ursula wanted to play games with magic and deception, then Marina would fight back with the one weapon the sea witch couldn't counter: absolute honesty. The next morning, she found Adrian in the stables, preparing his horse for what appeared to be a long ride. His movements were sharp and agitated, and when he saw her approaching, his expression was guarded. "Marina," he said with formal politeness that felt like a physical blow. "I was just leaving for the day." "Adrian, please," she said, abandoning all pretense of titles and protocol. "Something is wrong between us, and I need you to understand what it is." He paused, in adjusting his horse's bridle, his jaw tight with tension. "I've been thinking, and I realize I know almost nothing about you. Every time I try to learn more about your past, your answers are vague. Every time we seem to be growing closer, something strange happens." Marina's heart ached at the confusion in his voice. Confusion she knew was being amplified by Ursula's magic. "What if I told you everything, the complete truth about who I am and where I come from?" Adrian turned to face her fully, and she could see the internal struggle in his sea-glass eyes. "Would you? Because sometimes I look at you and feel as though I'm looking at a mystery I'll never solve." "Meet me tonight," Marina said urgently, "at the cliffs overlooking the sea. I'll tell you everything, no matter how impossible it might sound." For a moment, Adrian's expression softened, the old warmth flickering in his eyes. Then, as if a shadow passed over his features, the distance returned. "I'm not sure that's wise. Perhaps it would be better if we maintained a more professional relationship." Marina felt tears threaten, but she refused to give up. "Adrian, do you remember what you told me about the voice that saved you from the storm? The voice like music?" His hand stilled on the horse's reins. "What about it?" "Just remember that voice. Remember how it made you feel. And if you have any feelings for me at all, any trust in what we've shared these past weeks, please, come tonight." Before he could respond, Marina turned and walked away, her heart hammering with the desperate hope that love would prove stronger than magic. That evening, Marina waited on the cliffs as the sun set over the ocean. The familiar sound of waves against rocks called to her, and she found herself humming softly, not with her transformed voice, but with something deeper, more natural. The melody seemed to carry on the sea breeze, ancient and pure. Just as she began to fear Adrian wouldn't come, she heard footsteps on the rocky path behind her. He approached slowly, his expression uncertain but determined. "I almost didn't come," he admitted, settling beside her on the rocky outcropping. "Something in my mind kept telling me to stay away, that this was dangerous somehow." "That's because someone wants to keep us apart," Marina said quietly. "Someone who gains power from our separation." "Marina, what are you talking about?" She took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would either save their love or destroy it forever. "Adrian, do you believe in magic? In creatures that live beneath the waves?" His brow furrowed. "I've heard sailors' tales, of course. Mermaids and sea spirits. Why?" "Because I'm not who you think I am." Marina stood and walked to the very edge of the cliff, her dress billowing in the ocean wind. "I wasn't on a ship that was wrecked in the storm 3 weeks ago. I was in the storm, but not as a human." "Marina, you're frightening me." She turned to face him, and in the moonlight, her eyes seemed to glow with their own inner light. "The voice that saved you during the storm, it was mine. My real voice. Not this changed one you've been hearing." And then, despite every warning Ursula had given her, Despite the magical constraints on her transformed vocal cords, Marina began to sing. Not with the human voice the sea witch had given her, but with her true voice, the voice of the sea itself, ancient and wild and hauntingly beautiful. The song poured out of her like water breaking through a dam, carrying with it all the love and longing she'd held back, all the truth she'd been forced to hide. It was the song she'd hummed as she'd pulled him from the stormy waters, the melody that had called him back from the edge of death. Adrian's eyes widened in recognition and wonder. "It's you," he breathed. "You're the one who saved me." "I'm a mermaid, Adrian," Marina said, her true voice making the words ring like bells across the water. "A princess of Atlantica, the underwater kingdom. I saved you from the storm because I couldn't bear to watch you die. And then I fell in love with you." For a long moment, Adrian simply stared at her, his mind clearly struggling to process this revelation. Then, to Marina's amazement, he laughed, not with mockery, but with wonder. "A mermaid," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "That explains so much. Your knowledge of ocean currents, the way you speak of the sea as if it's alive, the mystery I could never solve when I looked at you. You're not afraid?" Marina asked uncertainly. "Afraid?" Adrian stood and moved toward her. "Marina, you saved my life. You gave up your entire world to be here with me. How could I be anything but grateful? Anything but in love?" The words hit Marina like a warm wave, filling her with joy so intense it was almost painful. "You love me? I've been falling in love with you since the moment I opened my eyes in that storm and saw your face," Adrian said, reaching out to touch her cheek. "Human or mermaid, princess or servant, it doesn't matter. I love who you are, all of who you are." As their lips met in their first real kiss, the magic of true love blazed between them like fire. In that moment, every one of Ursula's spells shattered like glass. The confusion and doubt that had been clouding Adrian's mind evaporated, leaving only clarity and certainty. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. The water below them began to churn and glow with malevolent energy, and Ursula's enraged shriek echoed across the waves. "No!" the sea witch's voice roared from the depths. "This is impossible! He cannot love her! I won't allow it." The sea itself seemed to rebel, as Ursula's fury manifested in towering waves and sudden, violent currents. Marina and Adrian held each other tightly as the very cliffs began to shake with the force of the sea witch's rage. "She's going to destroy everything," Marina said, fear cutting through her joy. "Ursula made a bargain with me, my life, if I couldn't win your love in a month. But now that I've succeeded, she's refusing to honor the agreement." "What can we do?" Adrian asked, his arms protective around her. "We have to hope that love really is the strongest magic," Marina replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "And we have to trust that my father will come." As if summoned by her words, the turbulent sea suddenly stilled. A new glow appeared in the water, not the sickly phosphorescence of Ursula's magic, but the warm golden light of benevolent power. King Triton rose from the depths, his massive form towering over the waves, his trident crackling with righteous anger. Behind him came an army of mermen, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. "Ursula!" Triton's voice boomed across the water. "You have broken the ancient laws by interfering with a freely made bargain. Release my daughter from your spell immediately." "Never!" Ursula shrieked, her tentacles writhing as she faced her old enemy. "She belongs to me now. Her failure gives me power over you." "She has not failed," Triton declared with magnificent authority. "She has won the prince's love through courage and honesty. Your bargain is complete, and she is free." "I won't let her go!" Ursula lunged forward with all her tentacles, dark magic crackling around her. But she had underestimated the power of a father's love combined with the ancient magic of the sea itself. Triton's trident blazed with golden light, and when it struck Ursula, she screamed once and then dissolved into foam, her evil finally conquered by the forces of justice and love. As the sea calmed and the immediate danger passed, Triton turned his attention to Marina and Adrian. His expression was stern, but Marina could see the relief and love in his ancient eyes. "My daughter," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the water, "you have chosen your path. Are you certain this is what you want?" Marina looked at Adrian, saw the love and acceptance in his face, felt the rightness of their bond in every fiber of her being. "Yes, father, this is where I belong." Triton nodded slowly. "Then you have my blessing. But know that in choosing the surface world, you choose to leave the sea behind." "Not leave it behind," Marina said with sudden inspiration. "Bridge it. Connect our worlds through understanding instead of fear." A smile spread across Triton's weathered features. "Spoken like a true princess. Very well. Live in both worlds, my daughter. Be the bridge between sea and land." With a gesture of his trident, Triton bestowed upon Marina a new kind of magic. Not the temporary transformation Ursula had given her, but the permanent ability to choose her form, to live as human or mermaid as her heart desired. As the Sea King and his retinue disappeared beneath the waves, Marina and Adrian stood alone on the cliffs, holding each other and marveling at the miracle of their love. "So," Adrian said with a grin, "I'm in love with a mermaid princess who can transform at will and whose father rules the entire ocean. This should make court life interesting." Marina laughed, the sound pure joy carried on the ocean breeze. "Are you prepared for that much adventure? With you?" Adrian pulled her closer, his eyes shining with love and wonder. "I'm prepared for anything." As they kissed again under the starlit sky, the waves below them sang with the ancient music of love triumphant, and the future stretched before them bright with infinite possibility. Chapter 9. The Revelation. The morning after Ursula's defeat dawned bright and clear, as if the very sky was celebrating the triumph of love over darkness. Marina woke in her palace chambers with a sense of wonder that everything had truly happened. The battle with the sea witch, her father's blessing, and most importantly, Adrian's acceptance of her true nature. She found him waiting in the garden, where they'd shared so many conversations, but this time his face held a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation that made her heart flutter. "I've been thinking all night," he said as she approached, taking her hands in his, "about everything you told me, about what this means for us." Marina felt a flutter of worry. And I realize that falling in love with a mermaid princess means I have a great deal to learn about your world." His smile was warm and genuine. "I want to understand where you come from, who your people are, what your life was like before you came here." Relief flooded through Marina. "You truly want to know?" "Everything," Adrian said earnestly. "If we're to have a future together, I need to understand all of who you are." That afternoon, at Adrian's request, Marina took him to the secluded cove where she had first washed ashore in human form. Standing at the water's edge, she called upon her father's gift and felt the familiar sensation of transformation. Her legs merged and shifted, scales replacing skin, until her magnificent emerald tail caught the sunlight. Adrian watched in fascination as she slipped into the deeper water, moving with the fluid grace that had been her birthright. When she surfaced near the rocks where he sat, her hair streaming like kelp around her shoulders, he shook his head in amazement. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined," he said softly. "I can see why the sea couldn't bear to let you go." "But it did let me go," Marina replied, swimming closer. "Because love is stronger than any claim of possession." Over the following days, Marina began to share the full story of her life beneath the waves. She told Adrian about her collection of human artifacts, about the way she'd been mocked for her fascination with the surface world, about her secret grotto filled with treasures from shipwrecks. "You were already studying my world before you ever met me," Adrian realized with wonder. "All those artifacts you collected, you were trying to understand us." "I was drawn to your people," Marina admitted. "There was something about human creativity, human ingenuity, that fascinated me. But it wasn't until I met you that I understood what I was really looking for." "What was that?" "Connection," Marina said simply. "The proof that different worlds could understand each other, could love each other despite their differences." As their conversations deepened, Adrian began to share his own dreams with new openness. He spoke of his vision for his future kingdom, a realm that would be open to trade and diplomacy with distant lands, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. "Your people and mine have avoided each other for centuries," he said thoughtfully. "But imagine what we could accomplish together. The Sea People's knowledge of ocean currents and weather patterns could revolutionize navigation. Our land-based agriculture could provide new varieties of kelp and sea plants for underwater cultivation." Marina's eyes lit up with excitement. "You're talking about true partnership between our worlds." "I'm talking about the future," Adrian said, pulling her close. "Our future." It was Princess Isabella who suggested they make their engagement official at the upcoming midsummer ball. "The entire court has been speculating about your relationship for weeks," she said with amusement. "We might as well give them something definitive to discuss." But first, there was a more important conversation to be had. 3 days before the ball, Adrian requested a formal audience with King Triton. Marina accompanied him to the cove at sunset, where her father rose from the waves in all his regal splendor. Adrian, to his credit, stood straight and respectful as he addressed the ruler of the seas. "Your Majesty, I come to formally request your daughter's hand in marriage." Triton studied the young prince for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeming to peer into Adrian's very soul. "And what can you offer my daughter, surface dweller? What assurance do I have that you can protect her, provide for her, understand the magnitude of what she sacrifices to be with you?" "I can offer her my complete devotion," Adrian replied without hesitation. "I can promise to honor both sides of her heritage, to be worthy of the extraordinary gift of her love. As for protection, I know Marina needs no protecting. She's the strongest person I've ever known. But I can promise to stand beside her, to face whatever challenges come our way together." "And the political implications?" Triton pressed. "You are a prince, heir to a throne. Your people know nothing of ours. How will you explain a mermaid queen?" Adrian's jaw set with determination. "By showing them that love transcends the boundaries we create in our minds. By proving that understanding between different peoples isn't just possible, it's essential for true prosperity." Marina felt tears of pride sting her eyes as she watched the man she loved stand before her father with such courage and conviction. Triton's stern expression gradually softened. "You speak well, young prince, but words are easy. Actions are what matter." "Then judge me by my actions," Adrian said simply. "Give me the chance to prove myself worthy of her." The Sea King nodded slowly. "Very well. You have my permission to marry my daughter. But know this, harm her, and you will answer to the fury of every ocean on this earth." "Understood, Your Majesty," Adrian replied solemnly. "And thank you." As Triton disappeared beneath the waves, Marina threw her arms around Adrian, her heart overflowing with joy and gratitude. "He likes you," she said, laughing through her tears. "How can you tell?" Adrian asked with a shaky laugh of his own. "He didn't summon a tsunami," Marina replied, which made them both dissolve into slightly hysterical laughter, born of relief and overwhelming happiness. The night of the midsummer ball arrived with all the pageantry and elegance befitting the most important social event of the season. Marina wore a gown of sea-green silk that seemed to shimmer like water in the candlelight, with pearls from her father's treasury adorning her throat. She felt like a bridge between worlds, human enough to belong in the ballroom, but carrying the magic of the sea in every graceful movement. When Adrian led her onto the dance floor for the evening's first waltz, the entire court watched with keen interest. But Marina was aware only of Adrian's hands on her waist, his eyes never leaving her face, the way he moved with her, as if they'd been dancing together their entire lives. "Are you ready?" he murmured as the music began to wind down. Marina nodded, her heart racing with anticipation and joy. As the final notes of the waltz faded, Adrian turned to address the assembled nobles. His voice carried clearly through the hushed ballroom. "My friends, I have an announcement to make," he began, his hand never leaving Marina's. "I have found the woman I wish to spend my life with, the partner I want by my side as we build our kingdom's future." He turned to Marina, his eyes shining with love, and dropped to one knee before the entire court. From his jacket, he produced a ring unlike any Marina had ever seen, a pearl the size of a robin's egg, surrounded by emeralds that caught the light like captured sea foam. "Marina," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom, "you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. You've taught me that the most beautiful discoveries come from opening our hearts to the impossible. Will you marry me?" Marina's answer came without hesitation, ringing through the ballroom like music. "Yes, Adrian, yes, with all my heart." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the court erupted in cheers and applause. But Marina heard none of it. She was lost in Adrian's eyes, in the perfect rightness of this moment, in the knowledge that love had indeed conquered all. Later, as they stood together on the palace balcony, watching moonlight dance on the waves below, Marina marveled at the journey that had brought them here. "No regrets?" Adrian asked softly, following her gaze toward the sea. "Only one," Marina replied, leaning into his embrace. "What's that?" "I wish it hadn't taken a sea witch's bargain to bring us together," she said with a laugh. "We could have saved ourselves considerable drama." Adrian chuckled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Perhaps. But would you have been brave enough to leave your world without that push?" Marina considered this. "Perhaps not. Maybe some love stories need a little magic to get started." "And what about our story now?" Adrian asked. "What happens next?" Marina looked out at the vast ocean, then up at the endless stars, feeling the infinite possibilities stretching before them. "Now we write the rest of it together. 2 worlds, 1 love, and all the adventures we can dream." As if in response to her words, a pod of dolphins breached in the moonlit water below, their joyful leaps creating silver splashes against the dark sea. Marina took it as a blessing from her father's kingdom, a reminder that she would always be welcome in both worlds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, explaining her true nature to the court, negotiating the complex politics of a union between land and sea, learning to be a princess in 2 very different kingdoms. But tonight, there was only love, only the perfect certainty that she and Adrian would face whatever came together. The sea had given her its greatest treasure, and she would spend the rest of her life proving worthy of that gift. Chapter 10. Royal Union. The weeks following Adrian and Marina's engagement were a whirlwind of preparation, diplomacy, and wonder. News of the prince's betrothal to a mysterious young woman had spread throughout the kingdom, but Marina's true nature remained a closely guarded secret, shared only with the royal family and their most trusted advisors. "The people will learn the truth in time," Adrian assured Marina as they walked through the palace gardens one morning. "But first, let them see who you are as a person. Let them witness your kindness, your wisdom, your genuine care for our kingdom's welfare." Marina had thrown herself into learning everything she could about ruling a land-based kingdom. She studied trade agreements with the same intensity she'd once devoted to collecting artifacts, and she spent hours with Princess Isabella learning the intricate protocols of court life. Most importantly, she accompanied Adrian on visits to villages and towns throughout the realm, meeting his people and beginning to understand their needs and concerns. "She has a natural gift for leadership," Isabella observed to her brother after watching Marina console a group of fishermen who had lost their nets in a recent storm. "The people respond to her genuinely. There's something about her that makes them feel heard and understood." "She sees connections others miss," Adrian replied, watching Marina help organize a community effort to weave new nets. "She understands that prosperity flows like water. It lifts everyone when it's allowed to circulate freely." Meanwhile, beneath the waves, King Triton was making his own preparations. Word had spread throughout Atlantica about Princess Marina's upcoming wedding, and merpeople from every corner of the seven seas were requesting permission to attend the ceremony. For the first time in recorded history, the underwater kingdom would send representatives to a surface world celebration. "This wedding will be more than a union of two people," Triton explained to his council of advisors. "It will be the first formal diplomatic contact between our peoples in 1,000 years. We must ensure it sets the right tone for future relations." 3 weeks before the wedding, Marina received an unexpected visitor. She was in her chambers, reviewing guest lists with Cordelia, when a palace guard announced that a delegation from the sea had arrived. Marina rushed to the royal pier, where she found her sister Aqua waiting with a small group of merpeople, all of whom had taken temporary human form for this historic visit. "Aqua!" Marina cried, embracing her sister joyfully. "I can't believe you're here." "Did you think I would miss my sister's wedding?" Aqua replied with tears in her eyes. "Besides, Father sent me as his official representative. I'm here to help plan a ceremony that honors both your worlds." Over the following days, the wedding preparations took on a magical quality, as land and sea traditions were woven together. Marina's wedding dress was crafted from the finest silk, but it was embroidered with pearls from the deepest ocean trenches, and decorated with sea glass that had been tumbled smooth by 1,000 years of waves. The ceremony itself would take place at sunset on the cliffs overlooking the sea, allowing Triton and other sea dwellers to participate while remaining in their natural element. "I've never seen anything so beautiful," Isabella breathed as she watched the seamstresses put the finishing touches on Marina's gown. "It looks like it was woven from moonlight and sea foam." "It feels right," Marina said, studying her reflection in the mirror. "Like I'm finally bringing all the parts of myself together." The wedding day dawned perfect and clear, with just enough breeze to carry the scent of sea spray up to the clifftop ceremony site. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, guests began to arrive. Nobles from Adrian's kingdom in their finest court dress, and merpeople who surfaced in the cove below, their scales glittering like jewels in the golden light. Marina stood at the entrance to the palace gardens, her heart racing with joy and anticipation. Through the windows, she could see Adrian waiting at the cliff's edge, handsome in his formal military dress uniform, his face bright with happiness as he spoke with the officiant. "Are you ready, dear one?" Aqua asked, adjusting Marina's pearl-adorned veil one final time. "I've been ready since the moment I pulled him from the storm," Marina replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. As the music began, a haunting melody that seemed to blend the best of land and sea traditions, Marina began her walk down the aisle. The path was lined with flowers from the palace gardens and bioluminescent sea anemones that Aqua had brought from Atlantica, creating a corridor of light that seemed to bridge the two worlds. When Adrian saw her approaching, his face lit up with such pure joy that Marina felt tears of happiness spring to her eyes. He looked at her as if she were the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen, as if he couldn't believe his good fortune in loving and being loved by her. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began as Marina took her place beside Adrian, "we gather today not just to celebrate the union of two hearts, but to witness the joining of two worlds. Prince Adrian and Princess Marina come to us from different realms, but they are united by love that transcends any boundary. As they exchanged vows, the sun sank lower toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reflected off the water below. Adrian's voice was strong and clear as he promised to honor Marina's dual heritage, to be worthy of her love, and to build a kingdom where understanding flourished between all peoples. Marina's own vows were spoken in both human language and the ancient tongue of the sea, her words carrying on the ocean breeze to reach both the assembled guests and her father's delegation below. "I promise to love you with the depth of the deepest ocean and the constancy of the tides," she said, her eyes never leaving Adrian's face. "I promise to stand beside you as we build bridges between worlds, as we prove that love knows no boundaries when hearts are true." As they exchanged rings, Adrian's, a band of white gold carved with wave patterns, Marina's the pearl and emerald ring he had given her at their engagement, the water below began to glow with soft, welcoming light. King Triton rose from the waves in all his magnificent glory, his trident held high in blessing. His voice boomed across the water and up the cliffs, audible to every guest. "By the ancient powers of the sea, I bless this union," he declared. "May your love be as enduring as the eternal tides, as deep as the ocean's heart, as bright as the sun's reflection on the waves." "You may kiss the bride," the officiant announced with a smile. As Adrian and Marina's lips met, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers from both land and sea. Dolphins leaped in the cove below, while doves released from the palace gardens soared overhead. The very elements seemed to celebrate their union. The wind carried the scent of flowers and salt spray. The waves sang against the rocks, and the setting sun painted everything in golden light. But Marina was aware only of Adrian's arms around her, of the perfect rightness of this moment, of the future stretching before them, bright with infinite possibility. As the evening progressed into celebration, Marina marveled at the sight of her two worlds coming together in joy and friendship. She watched nobles from Adrian's court chatting animatedly with mer-people who had taken human form for the occasion, saw children from nearby villages gazing in wonder at the bioluminescent creatures Aqua had brought as gifts, witnessed the beginning of understanding between peoples who had existed in separation for far too long. "Happy?" Adrian asked, as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, the sound of laughter and music surrounding them. "Beyond words," Marina replied, her heart so full of joy she felt it might burst. "I feel like I've spent my whole life collecting treasures, but this is the greatest treasure of all." "Our love?" "Our future," Marina corrected gently. "The chance to build something new together, to show both our peoples that differences aren't barriers, they're gifts to be celebrated." As the night deepened and the celebration continued, King Triton approached the couple during a quiet moment. His expression was tender as he looked at his daughter and her new husband. "You have chosen well, my child," he said to Marina. "This young man sees you for who you truly are, all of who you are." "Thank you, Father," Marina replied, her voice thick with emotion, "for your blessing, for accepting Adrian, for understanding that love sometimes requires us to build new paths." Triton turned to Adrian with a smile that held both warmth and warning. "Take care of her, young prince. She is precious beyond measure." "I will guard her happiness with my life," Adrian replied solemnly, "and I hope I can be worthy of the trust you've placed in me." "You already are," Triton said with approval. "Your love has given my daughter the freedom to be fully herself, mermaid and human, princess of sea and land. That is the greatest gift any father could ask for his child." As the Sea King returned to his realm and the last guests began to depart, Marina and Adrian stood alone on the cliffs, where their love story had truly begun. The moon cast a silver path across the dark water, and somewhere in the distance whales sang their ancient songs. "So, Princess Marina of Atlantica and the Northern Kingdom," Adrian said with a grin, pulling her close. "What adventures shall we have first?" Marina looked out at the vast ocean, then up at the star-filled sky, feeling the magic of her father's gift flowing through her, the ability to live in both worlds, to be a bridge between them. "All of them," she said with laughing certainty. "Every adventure we can possibly fit into a lifetime." And as they walked hand in hand back toward the palace that was now truly their home, the waves below whispered approval, and the stars above shone down in blessing. Marina had found her greatest treasure at last, not in any grotto or collection, but in love itself, and in the infinite possibility that came from two hearts choosing to beat as one. Their love story had conquered every obstacle, magical bargains, family disapproval, the fear of the unknown, and the schemes of those who profited from division. Now it would become something even more powerful, a living example that understanding between different worlds wasn't just possible, but beautiful beyond imagining. The little mermaid who had once collected human artifacts had become something far more valuable, a bridge between realms, a proof that love truly could conquer all, and a princess whose reign would be remembered not for the treasures she accumulated, but for the walls she helped tear down and the hearts she helped unite. And they lived, as the very best love stories promise, happily ever after.